Brittany Hennessy, Mrs. Brittany Hennessy. She's an author, influencer whisperer, TV commentator, and keynote speaker. Brittany Hennessy is the author of Influencer, Building Your Personal Brand in the Age of Social Media, the senior director, influencer strategy and talent partnerships at Hearst Digital Media, and the co-founder of Carbon, a technology, education, and lifestyle company building solutions for influencers. A member of the Real-Time Academy of Short-Form Arts and Sciences, Brittany judges the annual Shorty Awards and the Shorty Social Good Awards. She is also an active member of New York Women in Communications Incorporated and has served on the board of directors as Vice President of Scholarship and Awards and Vice President of Student Affairs. Welcome to the Reading Circle microphone, Mrs. Brittany Hennessy. Brittany, good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to bring you with me everywhere to do that bio before I do anything because I feel so important right now.
Well, I tell you what, I'll take you up on your offer because you know I keep telling myself, because I've been doing this 18 years. I also blog, I podcast, I write. So I always say I'm that one connection away from the big time. So I never know which one is going to be or who it's going to be. So I'll tell you what, if taking me around with you might be that one opportunity that I'll take you up on that.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, I did. Thank you so much for, especially with the release of the book, with it just coming out, because I know how busy that can be for authors when books are first released in terms of book signings and everything else that goes along with promotions. So whenever, I believe it was Keely had gotten back in touch with me and she said she would do August 11th. I was like, great. That's only a couple of weeks out from the release of the book. And again, the book is entitled Influencer. And what caught my eye, because lately I really, like I said, I was saying in just a couple of minutes ago, but there's some truth to that as well. I really have been looking at this whole thing of really becoming an influencer or the self-promotion or the branding and the marketing. And as I was going on Amazon, Brittany's book, and they did a real good job with that, and Brittany's book kept popping up as a pre-order. And it's very colorful on the cover and it's eye-catching. And I said, I pre-ordered the book. And like I said, I got in touch with her folks and she's here. And we're going to work our way up to what an influencer is. And more people, at least I know those of us who are in the business, if you will, whether it's radio, podcasting, blogging, whatever, really want to be heard. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about. And I was sharing with Brittany before we went on the air that most of the time, whenever I have guests on, I don't get to read the book until after the interview. I've skimmed it. But in her case, I actually read all of the book prior to the interview. So I know some of the tricks and the tips that she has in there, and we'll talk a little bit about them. But Brittany, one of my first questions, I really don't have a question list. It's kind of like, where did it all begin? I try to work our audience up to from where to where you are now. Talk to me a little bit about the writing and this whole interest in doing what you do. Is that something you did as a child in grammar school, high school, or post-school? Or where did this come from, this interest and everything you're doing with Hearst and the whole communications things? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I've always been a communicator. My mom always said I talk too much. So there really was no doubt that I was going to end up in communications in some way, shape, or form. I like to say people are only good at a few things. I think this is the only thing I'm good at, which is communicating. I don't even know if this disappeared as a field, what I would even do for income. I would starve. So I always knew I would be doing something in this field, and I majored in journalism. And I really wanted to write features for print magazines. And I graduated right as print was on the decline and digital was the new thing, and could not get a job to save my life in print. And so I took the first people who would take me, and I ended up working at a talent agency in the on-camera commercials department. So even to this day, if I watch television commercials, I know who all those people are. And I did that for a year. I really enjoyed working with the talent, but the actual job was a little boring. And I actually went to law school for a year and tried that. And I didn't really like it because it was too restricting, and I'm a much more creative person. It wasn't a complete waste because I met my husband there, so that's nice. And
that's
then,
right.
Well, while I was at the talent agency, I started a blog. And this was back in 2007 when blogging was still relatively new. And I blogged for about 4 years. And I would say in my second year of blogging, it really started to take off. And I had the opportunity to travel to Germany as the North American ambassador for Nivea. And they wanted me to hang out on a cruise ship with Rihanna for 3 days and tweet about it. And I said, do you want me to do what? And they're like, yeah, we're going to fly you to Germany and you're going to hang out with Rihanna.
Right.
Like, like, are you available? Like, am I available? It's Rihanna. I love Rihanna.
Right. It's like, am I available? Are you kidding? Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I went there, I did that, and I said, oh, so this social media, because I've always been an early adopter of anything social. Like I said, I communicate, and it's really the only thing I know how to do. So when I came back, I started reaching out to all my friends who worked at places or had small businesses. Like, are you guys doing social media? Like, do you have a Facebook page? How's your, communication with your audience on Twitter? And I started like a mini consulting agency and was helping a lot of people do that. And then I realized, I probably should get a full-time job because I'd like to have health insurance at some point. And so I worked at a fitness chain managing their social media and then moving their way up to brand director. And they actually were acquired by New York Sports Club, which was great. And while I was there, I worked there for like 3 years, and I really started tapping our members as influencers to promote the gym. And I was doing a lot of that work, and I had a friend reach out to me towards the end of my third year who I knew from my blogging days because she ran PR for a huge vodka company. And she told me, I'm going to Horizon Media to start the influencer department. She was like, I've got the brand piece covered. I need someone who speaks influencer. Do you want to come start this with me? And I was like, yeah, that's amazing. Like, I couldn't believe like this was already starting to take shape and become its own industry. So I worked there for almost 2 years, and I, did a lot of entertainment and consumer packaged goods and mommy tech and vitamins and all sorts of fun things. And then I really enjoyed the casting part because that's also what I did at Abrams, and I loved actually picking the talent that was going to be in the program.
Right.
And that's when Hearst announced the position I have now, which is the head of influencer marketing. And I actually got that job through a friend I had met in Germany on the Nivea trip. And so my entire career really has been shaped by a few people who I met very early on. And working there, at such a prestigious company, I always ended up at a lot of conferences. And no matter what the topic was, after the conference, there would always be like a long line of girls asking me, I'm an influencer. How do I get more followers on Instagram? Like, brands are reaching out to me. I don't know what to say. Or I have a lot of followers and I'm doing really well, but like I need to make more money so I can do this full time. And I really was starting to get a lot of the same questions. So my husband and I, we started an education company for influencers where we put on live events and aspiring influencers could come and learn from experts. And we had editors and photographers and producers and agents and publicists and people from the brand side and full-time influencers. And they could come and hear them speak and ask questions and really learn the industry. And producing live events is really time-consuming. It's expensive. And it doesn't have the scale that I knew was necessary. And so it really became clear that I needed to write a book. And there was no book that taught influencers how to be influencers. Plenty of books on teaching brands how to deal with influencer marketing and the different techniques. But that's only one half of the industry. The bigger half of the industry is the people actually creating the content. And I think because my job, I've always been the first person to have my job at whatever company I went to. There really were not a lot of people well-versed enough in the industry to teach other people how to do it. And so that's where the idea to write Influencer came from. And I interviewed a lot of experts, a lot of, really popular influencers, some of the best in their fields, and put together a very comprehensive guide on how to succeed in this industry. and the response has been amazing. And so I feel like I did something right, and it's nice because I got to use my journalism degree, which I paid so handsomely for.
I know that's right. So as I listened, and I told you on the line, we're very conversational. So I listen to what's going on, and my questions come along as I'm listening. And one of the first ones that popped in the head was when you were talking about the blog, and you said it caught on. Now, for me, and I'm sure others listening out there, that to me is kind of like the key question. What is it, or what does it take for something to catch on? What is that thing, or what is that turning point? Because there's a lot of us out there doing these things and it doesn't catch on, or they don't catch on. What is that? Is it luck? What is it? Or talk to me a little bit about that. And then the next question after that you can think about is, what is the definition of influence, or what? Because you said some, the kid, young ladies who come to me and say, I'm an influencer. How do you know if you're an influencer or not? So those are the first two questions of what is it, where does something catch on? And then how do you know if you're an influencer or not? And you can answer them in either order, whether the first way or the latter.
Sure. So when I had my blog, I was covering New York nightlife events and like restaurant openings. And so there was a Fashion Week party. It was pre-Fashion Week at this lounge that had just opened in time for Fashion Week. And the whole thing was, it had this super secret cocktail menu and no one had seen it, but it had like a cocktail on it that had gold. And it was like such a big deal. It's so funny, the things that are big deals to people. And it wasn't that big of a deal to me. I said, so what? It's an expensive drink. Who cares? And I saw the cocktail menu, and I was like, this is it. This is the thing everyone's so excited about. It's right here. And so I took a picture of it, and I put it on my blog. And keep in mind, like when I was doing my blog, I didn't really think anybody was reading it.
Right,
it just
exactly.
was a creative outlet for me.
Exactly.
And so I logged on the next day, and my site was down. And I was like, oh, my God, did I forget to pay, like, my Bluehost bill? Like, what happened? Like, where is my site? And then I checked my phone, and my phone was full of people telling me, like, your blog has gone viral. And I was like, what are you talking about? Nobody even reads my blog. And it turns out that somebody at New York Magazine read my blog because this story that I picked up, they wrote a whole piece on it. Like, somebody has finally seen this cocktail list, and she posted it, and here it is. And so overnight, I was like this blogger that everybody was reading and reaching out to. And so I think part of it is just doing things that are interesting to you, because if something's interesting to you, it'll be interesting to other people. And I think the biggest lesson I learned from that is to be ready, because my blog was something that I really did passively as a hobby. I hadn't updated the layout in a while. I didn't always make sure things were spelled correctly.
Right.
Like, any journalism professor or English teacher I've ever had would have been very angry about. And it really was just something I was doing to pass the time. And so when my blog became a sensation, literally overnight, I had to spend so much time sprucing it up. And I really should have been spending that time capitalizing on all the opportunities. And so I always try and tell people, like, if you treat something like a hobby, it will remain a hobby. Something is not a job until you treat it like a job. And when you get your opportunity, you have to be ready for it. And this is the internet. You never know who's reading your stuff. And this happens with influencers that I book all the time. I call them out of the blue and put them in a campaign, and they're like, I didn't even know you knew who I was. And I'm like, I've been following you for a year. Of course I know who you are. And so you would never know who's watching you. And at any moment, your break could come, and you just have to constantly be prepared for it. And I think that's something that people miss a lot. And just in terms of what is an influencer, an influencer is really just anybody who has some sort of influence. And if you're dealing in fashion and beauty and, topics that have millions of potential audience members, you really need a lot of numbers to be considered, a large number of followers to be considered an influencer. But if you're in something more specialized, like if you're in television or you're a writer or, you are dealing with mental health or something that the audience isn't as large, you can be an influencer in your own right with significantly less followers. And I think because so much of influencer marketing plays out on Instagram and YouTube, people think they need to have 1 million followers to be an influencer. But there are people, I've paid people who have 3,000 followers to do campaigns because they're just very influential in their field, online or offline. And it's always important to keep your numbers up because that, to a large extent, will determine how much you can make as an influencer. But it's always important just to make sure you have some sort of influence. And if you're, a radio host and you don't have a lot of followers, but you have a really successful show, you're still an influencer. It's just I might use you in a different way than someone who has, 1 million YouTube subscribers.
Those are excellent points, especially in terms of what you're saying, in terms of be prepared. Because as I said, there are so many of, I remember back in the day in terms of where AM and even AM for that matter, before even FM, I'm aging myself, but back in the day when you were talking, your major communication tool was radio and television. But with the advent of the internet and the accessibility, everyone now has either a podcast or a radio show or something that they're doing online. We're almost like fighting to be heard. And that's why when you start getting into influencer marketing or building your brand, for those that are interested in that, that's why it's so key, because we really are out there now competing against so many other people who are doing it. It's not as if just whoever the DJ of the day is on your local radio station or if you're in New York, major market folks. So like you said, because you're doing it, you never know who's watching. And that's, to me, the key piece, because you put it out there and you really don't know who's reading it. We look at the analytics and so forth and so on, but you don't know who with influence is reading or listening to your work that may one day just give a call and say, I really like your article. I'd like you to do this. And to me, that's the key thing. Oddly enough, I looked at my blog the other day, and what I didn't realize, until I looked back in the archives, was that I've been writing this blog for 10 years. My first post was in 2008. And this is 2018. I was like, wow, I've actually had the Critical Thinker for 10 years now. But again, you never know who's watching. You never know who's listening or when something's going to pop or when it's going to go viral. So talk to me a little bit about, and because it was interesting, you were asking the question about social media. And some of this stuff is kind of like, for me, confessional. And I'm very tech savvy because I was a communications major for one of my grad degrees. But for me, when social media was launched, Brittany, because I think the first little forays was like MySpace and all that. And I was kind of like, that stuff is for kids. And when Facebook came out, I was still kind of like, And then the light bulb shattered. Like, wait a minute, I could advertise my show on there. And that's for me whenever social media jumped off from the standpoint of letting people know that the reading circle existed. And that's whenever I got into LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. And when you talk social media, I'm on all of them out there, with the exception of like maybe Snapchat and all those. But talk a little bit about what's the best way to utilize all that social media to become the quote unquote influencer?
Sure. So I think influencer marketing is interesting and social media is interesting because it's so new and it changes so quickly that plenty of people don't even bother to read up on it and stay on top of it. But it really is just a new way to market something. And everything has, its own built-in audience. If you do something that's very visual, it's smart for you to be on YouTube. If it's something that's based in photo, it's smart for you to be on Instagram. Snapchat is one of those things that I don't understand Snapchat.
That's two of us. That's two of us.
You are definitely not alone, but like Snapchat, and then if you go even younger, there's Musical.ly, and these are, all things that plenty of people are using, and they have great audiences, but I would say they're definitely for Gen Z. And so when you're thinking about what platforms to be on for social media and how you should be on them and what you should be doing, you really need to look at what is your goal. And so the goal is always promotion, but do you need more people to click a link and go to a site and subscribe to something? Because if that's what you're looking to do, you have to make sure you promote your platforms on a place where people can subscribe. And so, there's actual links. So Instagram may not be the best thing for you. And so really you're trying to figure out where's the audience you're looking for and how can you find them.
So I'm looking here while you were talking. I picked up my telephone because I have all my apps in here, and I'm looking. I see I have Instagram, and I've even gotten on some of the new ones, some that folks never heard of. At least I hadn't heard of, but some of them are overseas, I think. But I'm on Instagram, Vero, Hello Network, LinkedIn, Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Hootsuite, Tumblr, YouTube, Mix, Reddit, Google Plus, FaceTime, Messenger, WhatsApp. Even one called Badu. I didn't even know what Badu was. I just stumbled on that one, got on that one. WeChat. I mean, it's like anywhere I can get the reading circle with Marc Medley, I'm on it. And
yeah.
And in terms of the blog.
You got a robust profile.
And some of them, like reading books like yours, turns me on to different things. Like I believe with you, the influencer marketing hub. I saw that in your book as well. Because anytime I see something like that, I immediately follow up on it with, going to Google or whatever with it. And that was, again, one of the sites that you recommended that I went to. It actually generates some hashtags for you. And I started using that, immediately. Because, again, whenever I'm reading books like yours, I'm really looking like, okay, what's the new thing that I didn't know about? And Brittany shares a lot of information in her book that you could use immediately. Like for me, I went to that influencer marketing hub and immediately started using the hashtag generator. There's some other things in the book as well as recommended. Again, this terminology that Brittany and I are talking this morning is new to some folks. It really is, because it wasn't here in the 80s or the 90s. It really kind of took off, in the 2000s, if you will, this whole notion of really being out there. Some people, even when you ask about social media, they start getting funny about privacy and this, that, and the other. Is there such a thing as privacy in 2018?
I don't really think there's privacy. It really is who you're interested in reaching and what you're interested in sacrificing in exchange for that. And so really, when you look at a lot of influencers, some of them are very, very public about everything that they're doing. And so they are exchanging privacy for fame. I think if you're using influencer marketing from a more professional standpoint and you're an expert, you can draw boundaries with your audience and really decide what it is you're willing to share and how much of your life you're willing to share. And, I am on social media and I share things with my audience. But I don't really post pictures of my son. I don't talk about my marriage. I'm really keeping it business. And if people have particular questions, that's maybe something you can answer. But you have to give up some level of privacy. Because there are people who come up to me on the street because they recognize me, which is a little weird, but that's what comes with being someone notable.
Right.
You're also someone who's known.
That's absolutely right. So when you're booking folks or because you open the book up talking about these astronomical salaries to do like maybe 10 to 15 to 60 minutes worth of work, if that, in terms of photo shoots or either posting about something or tweeting about something. Talk a little bit about that, because I didn't even realize kind of like those things happen, that somebody actually pay you to tweet about something.
So I think influencer marketing is a funny business, because people are always like, oh, they're just posting on social media. And then they realize how much some of these people make. And they're like, wait, she's making how much? And it's like, yeah, there's this YouTuber. My favorite story is that there's this YouTuber named Ryan, and he does Ryan's Toy Review. He's 11. He made $13 million last year.
Okay, folks, wait. I'm going to put a pin in that right now. Folks, did you hear her? 11 years old, $13 million for being a YouTuber.
Yeah, he opens toys and plays with them.
Wow.
That's his stick. Plenty of people are out here doing whole photo shoots, whole radio shows, writing books. He plays with toys for a living, which is a dream job for an 11-year-old.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I'm reading your book, and I saw something about somebody posting something with the dog, with the cats. It was again.
These people who have pets. Pet influencer is a huge category because all these pet companies need to push their product, and they could push it through a human, but why? You could push it through a dog, and some of these dogs have millions of followers. And I've worked with like celebrity dogs on Instagram, and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So if you have a pet and it's not working, you need to make him take him rent.
In other words, say you spending all the money on the pet can actually earn something. I mean,
Yeah.
but see, these are the things, again, listening audience, if you get the book, if you get Influencer, you understand what we're talking about. But there are opportunities out there that the average person probably would not even think of, or they don't think of when they're, like Brittany said earlier, about watching a commercial. Or if you're looking at a post, you don't even realize that some of the stuff is unless it says, of course, sponsored or promotion or what have you, that you're being promoted to. And you're thinking you're just looking at a fun picture or this, that, and the other, not realizing, like she said, that's a celebrity dog or a celebrity cat or what have you. And so you're wondering why do I want a dog all of a sudden? Why do I want to get a dog? You're wondering because you're constantly, again, what we're talking about here is the same way back in the 40s and the 50s or what have you, when commercials and things really kind of started taking off on television, when television was introduced, and folks, that's where the word soap opera comes from, because, folks were promoting soap on the commercials during the little show that you were watching for the hour. That's where the term soap opera comes from. But it's a new way of marketing, a new way of a new way of, for lack of a better term, influencing people.
Absolutely. And I think, part of what makes influencer marketing so great is that it's not a commercial. Like when you look at a commercial, it's something that's, done by an agency
right.
in like a warehouse somewhere. It's perfect. It's very like, our product will make your whatever squeaky clean. And it's very, it's very produced. And lots of times you see commercials that offer you products that you'll never buy because you're not the target demo. And when you look at like TV and print and even to a certain extent, some digital, they're really just trying to reach the most people possible. And of course you can try and, target certain magazines or TV shows to reach a certain audience, but you don't get the level of precision you can get when hiring an influencer. And it can be something as simple as, your local coffee shop hiring you to talk about the coffee. Right. Because you're very influential in your community, but they know that when you post something, everyone who sees it lives close to the coffee shop. And if you're, Jackie Aina is a great example. She's the largest, she's one of the largest YouTubers of color. I think she might be the first dark-skinned Black woman to hit 1 million subscribers, which is a big deal in the community because beauty is not something that's always been kind to African-American women. But she, if she's testing a product, that's a chance for Black women to see how that product works on us. And so, when people give her something, they're reaching a specific demographic. If you give something to a plus-size influencer, you're reaching a specific demographic. And so you really can target, of course, all sorts of people follow everybody, the majority of their community is usually made up of people who look like them. And so you really can target that a little more. And people are opting in. When you hit follow for an influencer, whether she's a large influencer or a community influencer, you're saying you want to see her content and you want to hear what she has to say, which is very different than like, a commercial interrupting your favorite show and like pushing a product on you.
And to me, that's in 2018. I mean, I've lived long enough. I always tease people, kids particularly, in terms of when I came on the scene, 33 and a half records and 45s was our mode of listening to music. And I have gone through 8-track tapes, cassette tapes, MP3s. I've scanned the gamut, and it's been a wonderful time to be alive. But it is amazing from the standpoint, and I was a marketing major, to go from, as you just described, the commercials, to where really now, your average, and when I say that, I'm not saying that in a condescending way, but when I say average Joe Blow, I mean just about anybody. If you have any type of pull or influence or market or brand, if you will, can become the person now, the spokesperson and it's through these various social media sites that you're not, because it's so targeted. That's what I'm getting at. It went from where everything was like a broad commercial hitting, even though they tried to target market then by demographics. But we've gotten now so specific to like you almost are influencing your neighbor on your block.
Yeah, it's great. And that's really what I love about influencer marketing. Like all of the women that I profile in the book, none of them are famous. None of them came to social media because they were already famous. They're all people who had like 0 followers who are like, let me just, try making some content and see if it resonates with anyone. And it really is, if you have a cell phone, sometimes you may or may not even need a computer depending on how good your phone is, and you have Wi-Fi, you can be an influencer. And
Correct.
So, unlike a lot of other careers where, like, if you want to be a model or an actress, you have to live in the hub. You either have to move to New York or you have to move to LA. There are influencers making a lot of money who live in the middle of nowhere, United States, because it doesn't matter. Everybody has an opinion, and everybody has an outlet at this point. And all you really have to do is put yourself out there in a way that people who are similar to you will find you, hear you, and connect with you. And now you've started influencing those people. And anytime you have an audience, brands will pay to have access to that audience. And like I said earlier, the more specific and niche it is, the more money you can make and the more influential you will be. And so it really is, it's nice to see that like anyone really can start, and with, the right foundation, because of course you still need to be passionate about what you're doing. People always ask me why I'm not an influencer, and I just say because I don't like anything that much. I don't want to get dressed for a living. I don't want to put on makeup for a living. I don't want to cook or design for a living. I really just like living my life. And if there's a day where I don't want to do anything, I don't have to do anything.
Right.
And influencers do not have that option, but they don't care because whatever they're doing, they would do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for free if they could. And so they're really just living the dream because somebody's paying them to do it all the time. And that sort of opportunity really is open for anyone who has something that they're passionate about, is willing to put in the work, because becoming an influencer, especially a full-time influencer, is hard work.
Right.
And now, hopefully, figuring out how all of this even works is a little bit easier because there is a book to help you, and you don't really have to just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I'm pretty much telling you what will stick.
And see, an interesting point that you brought up, and which I think a lot of times is a misnomer or a misconception or a myth, is the word influencer in and of itself. It leads one to believe that you have to be famous to be an influencer. And what I'm hearing from you, you're kind of debunking that myth.
Yeah, people really just equate influencer with Kim Kardashian. And if you're not Kim Kardashian or Kylie Jenner or like Gigi Hadid, you're not an influencer. And, as much as I love Kim Kardashian, I think Kris Jenner is a brilliant businesswoman, and she has built, plenty of people can't even get one kid to be successful.
Right.
She's got like a whole truckload of them, and they are all making millions and millions of dollars. So good for her. But, they're one type of influencer.
Right.
They're celebrities. There are influencers who are famous offline, and like a Kardashian or Serena Williams or, Oprah, any of these people who you love. And then they come online and they're life casters. And that's why I really make the distinction between people who are life casters.
Correct.
And people who are content creators. A life caster is a celebrity, a model, an athlete. It can even be like a dancer, a chef, a TV host, a radio host, someone who is just living their life and posting about it on social media, and you're following them because you either want to do what they're doing or you really like them and you're kind of nosy and you want to follow them. And so those are life casters, and there are plenty of people who fall into that category. And then you have on the other side, content creators. And content creators are famous because of the content they're making and distributing. And so those are your YouTubers, your bloggers, your Instagram girls, all of these people who their offline life doesn't really have something that's just worth following in and of itself. They're styling outfits and shooting them. They're cooking food and photographing it. They're deciding that they're going to teach you how to do a smoky eye and taping that. They're making content. And that's the majority of the people who are in the book. But we have some life casters too. There's this woman, Jessamine. She's a plus-sized yoga guru. And her whole thing was yoga is for everybody. You don't have to be super skinny to do yoga. She's like, I'm overweight and I do yoga and I'm really flexible and I love it. And so she's a huge influencer in the yoga community and in the plus size community. And it's just because she's doing something that she enjoys doing. And it resonated with people. And so you don't have to be a celebrity. Are you going to get to 110 million followers if you're not a celebrity? No, because that's really hard. They're really hard to do. But can you have a very engaged community? Yes. Can you have a nice number of followers for your niche? Yes. And can you make a little to a lot of money? Absolutely. And so it really just is figuring out where you fit in and not comparing yourself to Kim Kardashian. It's just the same as if you happen to play basketball on the side. You're not Michael Jordan. You may like playing tennis, but you're not Serena.
Right.
Just because you ran for student body president one time doesn't make you next in line to be Barack Obama. That's not how it works. And so I think, the same thing happens when you're creating content for the internet. Is you need to find your niche and you need to try and be like a superstar in your own lane. And you can look to other people for inspiration. But the reason why you'll be successful on social media is because people want to connect with you. So if you're just copying someone else, why would I follow you? I could follow them instead.
Correct. If by some crazy chance you are just joining me, because I honestly, first off, I hope you've been with me since 6, but definitely hope you've been with me since 7. My guest this morning is Brittany Hennessy, and she is the author of the book, Influencer, Building Your Personal Brand in the Age of Social Media. The blueprint to manage and monetize your influence as a content creator. That's what we've been talking about. And this book just dropped literally on July 31st. I pre-ordered it around July 14th or July 15th, somewhere around then. And it came onto my Kindle on the 31st, as a matter of fact. And I read it between now and, the time that we had the interview this morning. And it is an excellent read. Is it informative? And if you are someone who is looking to become an influencer, and remember what we just said, doesn't necessarily mean you have to be famous. But if you are looking to create your brand, this is the book for you. Packaging your brand. I'm looking on her website now. The feed. How do you find your voice and create great content? The audience. How do you get people to follow you? The goal. How do you prepare for what's next? And we've been talking about all that as we go along, and we'll talk about it for the next 15, 20 minutes or so before we finish up. We're talking about the feed. You're building your community. How do you find your voice and create great content again? And then, of course, there's that, as she said earlier, it's one thing to do it for a hobby. It's another thing to do it for a living. Monetizing it. How do you make some money out of it? I mean, literally, you just heard Brittany say, if you were with us, and if you weren't with us, I will say it again. An 11-year-old making how many million?
Like $13 million last year. It's unbelievable.
Okay, for playing with toys. Now, see, I could have done that job. When I was on vacation, I went down to Georgia to see my mom, spent a week with her, and was going through some of the old photo albums. And she has pictures of me playing with Tonka trucks and cranes and all that kind of stuff. AFX race sets and all that when I was a kid. So I could have done that job. There's no question about that. But I'm being tongue-in-cheek. But the truth of the matter is there's so many opportunities out there that we don't even think about. As a matter of fact, Brittany, what do you call it? Offline and online? When I'm offline, not doing radio, I'm actually an administrator in an elementary school. And we do career days, and all the kids want to be basketball players, football players, doctors, lawyers, teachers. I mean, the usual responses. Have no clue that opportunities like what we're talking about are out there. And I would say a good number of our adults don't have a clue that these opportunities are out there. So again, if you just joined us, welcome. If you've been with us since 7 or 6, again, I welcome you. And I'm getting ready to go into confessional. I actually confessed to Brittany about this when we were on the telephone prior to coming on the air. And again, I consider myself very media savvy. I've been doing radio now for 18 years, social media at least for the last 6 or 7. Whenever Facebook came out, somewhere along that lines, whenever I figured out it wasn't just for kids. And I've been posting on Twitter and so forth and so on. And I always saw the hashtag, never really kind of paid it any mind, never really gave it any thought. Didn't hashtag too much of my stuff. Every now and again I would. But after reading Brittany's book, and interestingly enough, Brittany, you have a hashtag on the cover of it. But after reading her book, I got into this hashtag thing, and I was telling her I couldn't believe how my Instagram numbers started popping. Every time I would put a post out now, I was gaining 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 followers per post. And it was because of the hashtag. And I talked a little earlier about the hashtag generator, so forth and so on. But Brittany, while I'm on this point, let's talk about the significance of and the importance of using the hashtag.
You know, there's so much content being created on a daily basis by millions of people. Whether you're an influencer or not, every time you post an Instagram post, you're adding to the number of pieces of content just out there in the universe. And it's really hard to get people to find you. Like if you're posting something but nobody sees it, you're not going to get any likes, you're not going to get any comments, and you're not going to pick up any new followers. You really have to figure out how can people see what I'm doing. And the hashtag is the best way to do that because plenty of people are just clicking on a hashtag that they like and going down the feed of, that hashtag and finding new people to follow. And so if you're not hashtagging your content, you're really just leaving it up to chance that somebody will magically find whatever it is you said. And you don't need to because there are proven ways to get your content in front of people. And so you really just have to figure out, like, who am I trying to reach? What are the popular hashtags for that community? And then, at least in the beginning, be very generous with them. People are a little afraid to use them, and I don't think you should be afraid at all. Throw them in there. Throw all of them in there. And then you can figure out which ones work, which ones don't work. We're very lucky that in 2018, we have so much data about what's happening on our posts. So if you go into, your Instagram analytics, which you'll be able to see if you have like a business page, everyone turn your Instagram into a business page if you want to do this, because again, this is a job, not a hobby.
Right.
You will be able to see, you use this hashtag and X amount of people saw your post because of it and X number of people followed you. If that number is high, keep using it. If it's not so high, swap it out for something else. And so you really don't have to guess anymore. You can use, the data to inform your decisions, but you've got to be using the hashtags to get that sort of information. And hashtags will change your life.
I cannot reiterate that enough. For those of you out there, if you're trying to get your content out for whatever area you're in, like for me, it's always something reading related, book related, author related, something along the education related, somewhere along those lines. But again, I cannot emphasize enough the difference that over the last couple of weeks, the hashtag has made. And I always, again, just like I was naive some years ago when I said, that's just for kids. To me, the hashtag was just a cutesy little thing. It was like, okay, everybody, folks will say hashtag such and hashtag this hashtag. Even we say it sometimes. So it never really dawned on me the significance of it. And this is the beauty of reading. This is why I cannot get folks to understand the beauty of reading books. You ought to learn something out of reading. I don't care if it's something little, something new, 1 or 2 things, something you didn't know. A lot of the things that Brittany has in the book I was familiar with. But the fact that the hashtag jumped out at me after reading her book and I started using it, that was worth the price of the book alone. The number of followers I've gotten from just inserting the various hashtags. And it's something you would think I would, you're right. You would think I would have known that using it and in the business, but we don't know everything. That's why reading is so important. And that's why a book like hers, because there's a lot of tips in there. There's the whole, like I said, there's the monetizing piece that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, of which, by the way, I told you I had to blog 10 years. I wasn't monetizing it because I know Google AdSense and all that. I never really got it. But after reading your book, I went on Google AdSense, got my blog into that, and now little ads come up. I don't know how much money is going to be made from it, but I said, you know what? It prompted me to do something. It was a call to action. Now, I think having listened to you, and I saw it in the book as well, I think I'm going to turn my Instagram account into a business account as well, even though there's a lot of personal stuff on there, but it's a lot of motivational stuff too. And again, most of it is about education and reading. But when you read a book like Influencer, that's what you ought to get. Like, what can I take from this to improve myself, to make myself better, to up my game? If you're looking to become an influencer, you can't get any better than that in terms of title. It's right there in front of you. Influencer, building your personal brand in the age of social media. So whenever you were kind of like putting the book together, I mean, was this your first book or have you done other books?
So this is my first book.
Oh, okay. So, like, what was that whole process like for you? Because I know you had the journalism degree, you were working in the various corporations. What was it like now? Because there are a lot of us out there who people tell us, there's a book in you. I know you're going to write a book. What was the process like for you?
You know, I like to say I'm a special case. One, because I like writing. One, because another reason because I talk a lot and I work really well under pressure. And so the book process is really different for everyone. And for me, I'm a huge procrastinator. And, you know, it's something that I'm constantly trying to improve, but there are worse things to be than a procrastinator. So I'm okay with it. And my husband really kept pushing me like, you should write a book. And I was like, I know. He's like, no, I'm serious. Like, you should write a book. Did you write your proposal? So really you have to write a proposal. And the proposal, there are plenty of templates you can download online. And the proposal really lets you know, can you write a whole book about whatever it is you're thinking of? And writing fiction and writing nonfiction is very different. For fiction, you usually have to like write the book or write, you know, a large amount of the book. For nonfiction, you're really doing you're doing the introduction, maybe you're doing a few chapters, you're figuring out like what's the outline of this book. What is each chapter going to be about? Who's the who's the audience for this book? What's the market currently like? Why would people buy your book instead of someone else's book? Are there books like yours? You know, and everybody says no. And then it's like, no, really, are there books like yours? And what, you know, what are those books and how is your book different? And once you flesh all of that out, you really can start to see if you have the makings of a book. And then you take that proposal and you shop it around to a bunch of literary agents to see, and you can self-publish. Plenty of people self-publish. You know,
Correct.
there are similar books about, you know, getting Instagram famous or YouTube famous that are self-published, but it's different. You know, it depends on if you're writing a book just because you have something to say and you want to make some money off of it, because you know, if you self-publish and promote, people will buy it and you'll make a very large percentage if you sell it on Amazon. But as a writer and someone who wanted to, you know, establish credibility in an industry, it was very important that like a publisher publish my book. And so to do that, you've got to go through an agent. So I had a few people, I just had friends like reading it, and I work with a lot of agents because a lot of influencers have agents. And they, at Abrams, they actually sent it to my friend in the influencer department actually sent it to the literary department, and they loved it, which was great because Abrams is the job I had in the on-camera commercial department. So I'm actually signed. Yep, I'm signed with the very first people who gave me a job. And so that's always a nice story. And then they take your book proposal and they shop it to publishers. And it's, you know, it's a really interesting process because you know you have a good idea, you know it's going to work. And of course, plenty of people get rejected. You know, the author of Harry Potter, like nobody wanted to buy the book. All of those people are insane because I think one person, I think, and it was even on the second time she applied to them, one person said, okay, we'll buy it. And, you know, all of those people are kicking themselves.
Yeah, because it's on Broadway now. I just saw the sign for it last night. It's on Broadway.
Yeah, Broadway. It's got an amusement park. It's got all sorts of products. And she's just looking at other people going, you could have this and you didn't want it. So, you know, those stories, those stories are, everywhere. People didn't want to sign, the Beatles. People didn't want to sign the Jackson 5. Like, plenty of people didn't think Marilyn Monroe could be an actress. Like, these stories exist everywhere. And so you really have to be okay with rejection. You have to know that what you're offering is good, because a lot of people rejected my proposal, publishers. They said, I don't know how you could write a whole book about this. This is more of a magazine article. Obviously, you can write a whole book. I wrote a whole book.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Or they would say, I don't really know, like, where we would put this in the bookstore. Like, is this a business book? And it's like, yes, it's a business book. It's a new type of business, but it's business. Or a very popular critique was, I don't know how many people will want to read this, which is crazy, because on Amazon and new releases, this book is number 1, number 2, and number 3 in paperback, audio, and Kindle. And so plenty of people are reading it.
Absolutely. I saw it when they started advertising that in the middle of July. And like first of middle of July, and they were doing the pre-orders. And I immediately put in my pre-order. So there are those of us out there who are interested in this topic.
Yeah, and so you really have to convince someone, and finding a book publisher is a partnership like anything else. You really want to find someone who believes in what you're doing, will support you, will guide you to make a better product, but won't necessarily change it, because this book, and you've read it, so we can talk about that, but this book is really, I tried to keep it very positive. I tried to keep it light. It's funny. It's in my voice. It's not like a textbook. If you're reading it, and now that you've heard me, on your show, people can hear my voice when they're reading the book, which is always fun. But it could have been a book that turned very mean or sour, or something that was, very dry and textbook-like. And working with your editor, they have a lot of control over what the final book looks like. So you really have to make sure you find someone who's aligned with your vision. And then people who believe in you, because I think lots of people I have quite a few friends who have written books, and they all were signed with huge companies, that their book came out the same week as like a celebrity's book, and their company didn't really give them the time of day. They didn't give them the time and the resources that they needed. And their book ultimately wasn't as successful as it could have been. And I'm signed with Kensington, which is a family-owned company. I got to meet the CEO. It's very nice. And they really took great care of me. And this was a book that they thought was going to be a hit. And so they put in the time and effort to make sure the book was going to be successful. And for a lot of people, it's always one of those things where you're like, oh, I'm not. In the very beginning, I was happy, of course, that I was signed to a company. But I was like, I'm not signed to like one of the major ones. But then I started thinking about it, and I said, I want to be with the people who understand me and understand that this book is good. And whoever that is, I'm happy that we're going to be partners. And they're the best partner I could have asked for. And so you work with them, and you write the book, and then you go through edits, you go through more edits, you go through more edits, you go through more edits, and you really just keep, getting it in fighting shape until it's something that can be published. And everyone is different. Some people, it takes them 2 years to write a book. I wrote this book over my vacation from work. I used my vacation days to write it. All right. So, I really just turned it out, and then you go through all the stages, then you see the final manuscript, then it's bound together, and, and then it's finally available. And really it just is, you have to just keep hacking away at it, because it's daunting. I had to fill 256 pages of things from my brain. And I never want to write anything ever again. That's not true. But it definitely was a lot. And I think the most important thing I learned from writing a book is there's so many things, and everybody who's an expert in their field, or, is very passionate about something, there's so many things that that other people have no idea is a thing. And I just was thinking, of course I can write about this, but what am I going to say that people don't know? All of these things are so basic. And it's basic to me because I've been doing it for almost 10 years. Right. But to other people, they, even you said, I really never considered using the hashtag in that way.
Never thought about it. That's right.
Yeah, and that's something to me, it's of course you would use hashtags, but I had to write it out. It was explain this to someone who has like landed on Earth from another planet. And it's like,
that's
what
exactly
is
right.
Marketing?
That's exactly
Start
right.
from the beginning.
Like Denzel said, break it down to me like a kindergartner. That's absolutely right. And
exactly.
I'm glad because you brought it up as we're getting nearer the end, because listening audience, we've actually discussed the book throughout the conversation. But I want you to get the book so that you can get more detail. We've kept it on a high level to whet your appetite, but I need you now to go out and get the book so you can get into the details. You talked about an agent a little bit ago. Let's talk a little bit about that, the contract and the agent. I got a kick out of you, but I always say most people just sign a contract without reading it.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the contract and the agent, and then we'll work our way on to the close. Oh, and I laughed so hard when you said, I'll never write. You're the first author I've heard that said that. I wrote this book, I'll never write another one again. That's why I laughed so hard, because out of my 18 years, I never had an author say that. Like, I'll never write again.
Yeah, it really is like when you write something, you have put like everything into it. And,
that's right.
Unless you're writing fiction and you're like, what's this character going to do next? It's really like, I've put my whole brain on this paper. Like, until I learn something new, I don't have anything else to talk about. So,
I tell you what, but before we get to the contract and the agent, because especially since we were talking about that piece of the writing of book, what was it like for you whenever the finished product? And this question I do always ask my authors: when that first box arrived at your doorstep, and you had an opportunity to open that box up, and you pulled out that fuchsia color influencer and the multicolor hashtag and your name, Brittany Hennessy's on the bottom. What was that like for you holding that in your hand?
You know what? It's when you get an advance copy, so you get the first printed copy of your book. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is cool. But I think you don't realize that you've written a book until somebody else has it.
Right.
And so I had the book, I had the cover of the book for a while, then I had like the galleys, the advanced copies, and I had given them to the influencers in the book so they could start promoting to get pre-orders up. And it's all just like business. Like you're like, this is part of what I have to do to promote the book, and you're just working on it. And I was doing a lot of pre-press and podcasts and radio shows and things, and you're just going along. But it's really when you hit specific milestones for yourself. And since I've wanted to be a writer since I was a very small child, one of my goals has always been to do a reading at Barnes & Noble Union Square.
Okay, all
and
right.
I was lucky enough to do that on August 2nd.
Wow.
And it was only when I was standing there and they were announcing me that it hit me like, oh my God, I wrote a book. It's in this store that I have been in countless times. I'm standing up here about to like read from my book, which so many people I admire have done. And this audience is full of people who purchased my book and like care that I wrote something. And I got up there and I started talking and I just started crying. And I was like, please don't post this on the internet, me ugly crying on stage at Barnes & Noble. And even like thinking about it now, I'm getting like a little teary-eyed about it because that was such a big goal for me. And that was like huge. Like I had achieved like a very specific, hard to obtain goal. And I think, for every author, everybody has like their moment. Anybody who does something that brings them great success, every artist remembers the first time they're outside and like somebody else is playing their song. You're like, oh my God, you know who I am? Like, that's me. I'm singing that.
That's right.
So, everybody has their moment, and it's not always when you see the copy of the book, because you've been working on this book for so long. You're like, oh, look, here it is.
Right.
It really is just part of the process, but it really is once it starts going. I say writing a book is very similar to being pregnant and having a baby. Carrying this kid for 10 months. When it's born, you're like, great, it's here. But like you've been waiting for this for months and months and months.
Right.
And now it's like, okay, it's done. But then as your child gets older and like goes out into the world, you're like, oh my God, like I'm somebody's parent. And so I think writing a book is most similar, I think, of anything in my life to having a child. It's very similar. And then you're like, are people going to like them? What's the reaction?
That's right.
Like, does it look like me? Like you have all of those same concerns. And so it's interesting, but everybody should have you should always determine what does success mean to you in the very beginning, because then you don't have a constantly shifting goalpost and you can actually achieve goals that you've set out to achieve.
That's a wonderful story about doing the book reading or the signing in the place that you had gone to. And that would take me off on a whole nother topic about the law of attraction and vision boards and goal setting and really, because something that you said years ago came to pass so many years later, but it came to pass nonetheless. And I won't even go down that road because we'll talk for another 2 hours if I get on that topic. But in terms of going back to the contract and the agent, I mean, again, because we said influencers aren't necessarily famous, but so talk a little bit about, okay, what would be the best way to utilize the contract and an agent if you get to that level?
Sure. So I think, people always ask me, when should I get an agent? How do I know when I need one? And, it really depends on if you've got a support team. There are plenty of influencers who, they're solo, they're doing it themselves. There are plenty of people who their mom's their agent or their husband or their sister-in-law. If you've got family that have negotiating chops, you can definitely put them on payroll. Who doesn't want that?
Right.
But, you really need an agent when you're spending more time negotiating your contracts than you are doing whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, because then you need someone on your behalf. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an agent. It can be a manager. It can be a publicist. But there comes a point where, when you start to be in demand and you can't be scheduling your own thing because you're too busy. And so that's really when you want to look and find someone to work on your behalf, and you really want to vet this person because this person becomes you out in the public world. And there are so many influencers, and I'm sure this is true with actors and musicians and dancers and chefs and anybody who has representation. There are so many people who their agents are not the best people. And, you really do miss out on, you might be a lovely person to work with and really good at what you do, but you will lose out on a lot of work because your team is not pleasant to deal with. And there are plenty of influencers that I will not book for anything because I do not want to have to talk to your agent because they are the worst.
That's absolutely
for whatever reason. You really have to find out, do they mesh with you? Are they going to do a good job? And what do other people think of them? Because that's the most important piece on deciding if you're going to have an agent, a manager, a publicist, or anything like that. And then just with the contracts, my mother always told me, do not sign anything before you read it.
Right.
Of course, I continue to sign things without reading them because, plenty of things your parents tell you that make so much sense you just don't do.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't until I went to law school, and I only went for a year, but really that's all you need to know to learn basic legalese, is contracts are complex, they are difficult, they are hard to read. Lots of times they're there to, fully benefit the person providing it and to take advantage of the person signing it. And you have to read them. You need to read them. I send influencers contracts all the time via DocuSign, and they come right back. And I'm like, this is a 10-page document.
Right.
There is no way you read this. They just made sure their name was on it. They double-checked the amount of money, and they signed. And you cannot do that because there are so many things in contracts that will affect your future. One of the easy ones is, how long will it take you to get paid? Are you going to get paid right away? Are you going to get paid in 90 days, in 120 days? What's the payment structure? What do you have to do? How are they going to use what you're making? Plenty of people think, it's a small amount of money, but it's only going to live on the brand's Instagram. And then they see their picture in a billboard. Right. And they're like, billboard? I would have charged you way more than that. And they glossed over the part where it said, we can do whatever we want with this piece of content.
Right.
You're giving it to us.
Right.
And they didn't read that section. Or they're dealing with, a lipstick and they say, we're going to hire you to do this and you can't work with another lipstick company for 3 months. And maybe they gave you $2,000, and then 2 months later, a huge company comes and wants to give you $25,000. You can't take that money because you're under contract for another month. And if you didn't read that, you'd take this money anyway. now you have a huge legal problem because you didn't read your contract. And so I always encourage people, like, you must read your contract. Contracts are jumping off points for negotiations. If you don't like what something says, you can cross it out and send it back and say, I'm ready to sign this, but I don't like this part. Or what does this mean? Like, if someone's offering you a job, you don't just sign on the dotted line because you're just so happy to have a job. You're worth something to them, which is why they are hiring you. So it's kind of like being on a date. You don't just do whatever your date wants to do, especially if you're a woman, because he's paying.
Right.
That's not how this works. You're also on this date. You're bringing value, so you have a say in what the terms are. And so if you see something and you don't like it or it doesn't sit right, you don't just sign things for the check. You know, you speak up, use your voice, make suggestions, and if people aren't willing to budge, sometimes you have to walk away.
Right.
And I think that's something people don't like, to walk away from things. But staying in a contract or signing a contract could really cut you off from huge opportunities in the future because you needed a little bit of money at the time. Like, there's so many times things are not worth it. And I think people really need to spend a lot of time figuring out, what am I worth? What are my goals? And what am I not willing to settle for? And if something comes along that fits in that box, you have to walk away from it and not be afraid to do so.
And those are wise words for any of you listening out there. And that's not just for influencer contract. That's any contract. Like she said, whether it's job, whether you're purchasing a home, whether whatever you do, if it's a contract, and it can be laborious, it could be tedious, but take the time to read the words, because as she said, they are designed. And there are times when the exact example she's given, they're embedded in that contract if you didn't read it, in terms of like the billboard she said, or either you're restricted. I've had that with some authors who couldn't appear on the show. They wanted a contract that said we can't appear on any, radio show or anything like that after a certain amount of time or before a certain amount of time because I'm contracted with this media agency or so forth and so on. So absolutely, it does occur, and you need to be mindful of that. We have come down to the end. And like I said, I hope you didn't just click in, because it's been a great interview. We started at 7 and I've been on since 6, but we've come down to the end. And Brittany, what I do is I shut the mic off. I don't say a word. I allow the guests to promote. And you can say anything you would like to say. Shout out anybody you'd like to shout out. You can say anything with the exception of a dollar amount, because you were talking about negotiations a minute ago. Folks can negotiate that when they contact you in terms of book signings or appearances or copies of books, so forth and so on. So anything short of a dollar amount, I'm going to shut the mic off, and it's your time to promote.
Sure. So thank you so much for listening. I really love all of the opportunities I'm having with this book to just get out and teach the message of, building your personal brand, packaging it, negotiating for what you're worth, and really just owning the presence that you are creating in the digital world. The book is Influencer, Building Your Personal Brand in the Age of Social Media. It is available literally everywhere: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. If you're in an airport, there's a fun hardcover version that has a bonus chapter. If audiobooks are your thing, there's an audiobook, and I read it. It's available digitally. It's everywhere. It's getting great reviews. People are really liking it and saying it's helping them a lot. So I hope it helps you, and they're great pieces of information you can pull from it. So please buy it. My editor will kill me if I don't say it one more time. Buy the book. And I'm on Instagram. That's my primary channel, at Mrs. Brittany Hennessy. And I like to, give these sorts of tidbits in picture form. And really, you can follow me to see what happens after you read a successful book and what it's like hanging out with influencers all day. And so Influencer is the book, and Mrs. Brittany Hennessy is the handle. And I'm just happy that you guys listened this far and thought what I had to say was interesting. So thank you so, so much.
Well, thank you for rising early with me, and I'm grateful and thankful that you're on the East Coast, because as I said, sometimes my guests are calling from the West Coast. So at least I know it was early, but at least, and we had a wonderful time together. And like I said, if I didn't get anything, and I got a lot out of the book, but if I didn't get anything out of it, it was that power of the hashtag. I've been hashtagging my backside off. And so if I didn't get anything out of it, I got that, and I've been utilizing that and some of the other resources that you referenced in there. Again, listening audience, the book is Influence. Now, oddly enough, the title is the word influencer is in small case. It's a small I with the Wi-Fi sign on top. And the rest of the letters are small as well. And it's a very colorful book. You can't miss it. She's right. You really cannot miss it. The influencer is in like a fuchsia or a mauve or whatever color whatever you call that. And then the hashtag is multicolored. But again, I highly encourage books if you are looking to build your brand, in which all of us are doing one way or the other. We're building our brand. But if you want to have that social media or that internet or online footprint, this is the book for you. Again, Brittany, thank you so much. I wish you nothing but the best. I'm already following you on all of your various sites. I know I have you on Instagram because I remember what struck me was the Mrs. That caught my attention, the Mrs. Brittany Hennessy. So I got that on Instagram as well as some of the other sites. And again, for those of you who are looking to do that, get as many resources as you can to help you do that. You never know what you're going to pick up, what you're going to learn. I can confessionally say, if that is a word, that the hashtag leaped out at me. I don't know, maybe the subliminal hashtag on the cover did it. I don't know what it was, but all I know is I had not paid any attention to hashtag until I read your book. So have a wonderfully blessed week, day, whatever. I wish you nothing but the best on sales. If I see something that you're doing a signing somewhere local that I can get a chance to get out and meet you personally, I will certainly do that. If you're in the New Jersey area, any of the Barnes & Nobles, any of the bookstores there, or New York for that matter, because I'm right across the bridge, let me know and I'll see if I can run out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark.
All right. And you'll get a copy of, like I said, it's recorded, so it'll be in my YouTube archives as well as on an MP3 link, and you can do whatever you like with it. No contract, nothing in the contract says you can't do whatever you want to do with it. All right.
Fantastic.
All right. Take care now.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of another reading circle with your host, Marc Medley. Had a lot of fun this morning with Brittany. That's Brittany Hennessy. Hennessy. And the book is Influencer, Building Your Personal Brand in the Age of Social Media. The blueprint to manage and monetize is money, your influence as a content creator.